You blew it, boy! You really blew it!
You blew it! You had it all and you blew it!
You blew it! You blew it!
You blew it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this video, we got to talk about how just when you think DC is getting their act together, just when you think DC is about to overtake the pop cultural zeitgeist with their cinematic franchise led by James Gunn, we get some news like this. Henry Cavill is out. No longer gonna play Superman. It is a very sad day. It is a very sad day for fandom. This is really disappointing. But also, I kind of understand it. So in this video, we're going to talk about the news. We're going to talk about kind of what happened with the Henry Cavill situation. And then later on in the video, because we're a comic book YouTube channel, we're going to talk about, some interesting roles that maybe Henry Cavill is going to slide in and what potential books those could be, whether they're for DC or they're for Marvel. But before I get into the video, if you guys could drop me a like or a comment or subscribe, help support the channel, do one of those things. But let's get into this video here today. All right, we got to go over the news first. Obviously, if you guys haven't heard already, this is a kind of a breaking news situation. James Gunn had this to say on Twitter, and it was followed up by a Henry Cavill Instagram post. So let's kind of read the post together here. Here is James Gunn's Twitter. He was talking about, kind of plans for DC moving forward, and he had this to say. Among those on the slate is Superman. In the initial stages, our story will be focusing on an earlier part of Superman's life, so the character will not be played by Henry Cavill. But we had a great meeting with Henry, and we are big fans, and we talked about a number of exciting possibilities to work together in the future. So coming out with the announcement, Henry Cavill, his last portrayal of the Superman character was in fact in the Black Adam film. We hop over to Henry Cavill's Instagram where he had this to say in response. I have just had a meeting with James Gunn and Peter Safran, and it's sad news, everyone. I will, after all, not be returning as Superman. After being told by the studio to announce my return back in October prior to the hire, this news isn't the easiest, but that's life. The changing of the guard is something that happens. I respect that. James and Peter have a universe to build. I wish them and all involved with the new universe the best of luck and the happiest of fortunes. For those who have been on my side through the years, we can mourn for a bit, but then we must remember Superman is still around. Everything he stands for still exists, and the examples he sets for us are still there. My turn to wear the cape has passed, but what Superman stands for never will. It's been a fun ride with all of you. Onwards and upwards. So that's what Henry Cavill had to say right there, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, this guy to me feels like maybe the biggest free agent in superhero casting there could possibly be out there right now in Hollywood. I gotta say, the way that Henry Cavill always carries himself, he is such a class act, and you can tell he is definitely a fan of these properties. He has a lot of respect for the characters he plays, for the fans, for the TV shows, for the movies, and for that reason, we definitely need to get this guy in the MCU. If he's not going to be Superman, perhaps he's going to be another DC character. Either way, this guy's got to be in superhero pop culture in some way. And so I kind of pulled up a few interesting books, some Pepe Sylvia town, some tinfoil hat here, but others also some rumors that have been circulating around Henry Cavill for quite some time. And I thought it would be, interesting for us to go over them here today. So the first things we got to talk about here are the DC possibilities. And the first kind of character that comes to mind if they wanted to do something like this would be to actually have Henry Cavill play Bizarro. Now, of course, Bizarro is sort of the anti-Superman, the villainous Superman, the kind of zombie undead version of Superman. And he made his first appearance in Superboy number 68, this book right here. Now, in my opinion, this is the go-to book for Bizarro, but there is also Action Comics number 254, which this would be the first appearance of Bizarro actually taking over as sort of the Superman doppelganger situation. Bizarro has that ability to become the villainous version of whichever character they're going against, and Action Comics 254 is when he actually goes against Superman right here versus Superboy in number 68. I think it is certainly possible that we could see Henry Cavill playing Bizarro, although I don't think it is very probable, which is why, this is purely speculation at this particular time. But I do actually think Bizarro is an interesting Spec villain that could be a character that shows up in this kind of newly reformed DC universe. I think if they bring in a new Superman character, having an enemy like Bizarro that kind of represents the character in effectively every sort of opposite physical way and every sort of equal and opposite, thematic way, I think that is a great way to kind of double down on the themes of the introduction of the origin of, a Superman type of character, although they said they didn't want to do a full-on origin story. So Bizarro is certainly on the table. Other character that I think is interesting, and another book as a result of that I also think is interesting, is Action Comics number 242 from 1958. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the first appearance of the villainous character known as Brainiac. Of course, Brainiac is one of Superman's most iconic villains, certainly an enemy of Krypton himself, a very, intelligent force out there against Superman. And this is an interesting sort of spec villain that I think is guaranteed to be coming to the DC James Gunn universe at some point in the future. I mean, even the Richard Donner Supermans, it had been talked about having Brainiac be in one of those Supermans all the way back when. So it does really feel like, DC has never really been able to execute this villain on screen. And this character feels like it would be a great addition to the James Gunn universe. Now, again, this is one of those situations where it's possible, but probably not very probable. I can't imagine that in these last two picks that I have for you guys, that Henry Cavill would actually want to be, sort of second fiddle to whatever Superman character there is. I sort of just bring these up as possibilities and interesting spec books regardless. But if Henry Cavill is going to have a relationship with DC, I do think he's going to want to have sort of a juicy role, a juicy superhero character. And one of the first ones that comes to mind is actually the character of Spectre. Now, this book right here is Showcase number 60. This is the first appearance of Spectre in the Silver Age. And I kind of think of Spectre as an amalgamation of Doctor Strange and Ghost Rider. Let me know in the comments if you think that that is a good comparison. But when I think about the possibility of the DC characters that are out there and cool ones that Henry Cavill could play, it doesn't really feel like there's a lot of fitting options. But I do think that Spectre might be an interesting person for him to fill the shoes of, simply due to the fact that, I think he can kind of bring that brooding Witcher persona into a character like the Spectre. Now, this right here, like I mentioned, is the first Silver Age appearance. None of us are affording the Fun Comics original first appearance of Spectre, so I don't necessarily bring it up. But I do think that this is a really good book to pick up now, a good speculation for a character that I think will be showing up in DC at some point in the future. Prices aren't too bad for this one overall. Of course, at the high grade, we're looking at in the thousands, but in the low grade, you can definitely find, some pretty nicely presenting copies around that $100 to $200 range. All right, the last sort of DC spec character I have for Henry Cavill is from Strange Adventures number 205. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the first appearance of the character known as Deadman. Now, Deadman, I think, is another character that is likely going to make his way into the DC universe at some point. And when I think about, all the roster of DC superheroes there are and who Henry Cavill could possibly play, it feels like they would want to do, something different with him, not to have the Superman comparisons. And a character like Deadman could be really interesting for a lot of the reasons I talked about with the Spectre. Like, this is somebody who, can take that kind of Witcher persona. He can be a little more brooding and mysterious and kind of interject it into a totally different character. And that might be kind of attractive for Henry Cavill overall. But this book right here, I think, is a character that is on the precipice. I think Deadman has a huge fan base. I think that this is a book that could really blow up the market, mostly due to the fact that it's actually attainable. I mean, I think a lot of the DC superhero first appearances come from the Golden Age, and it's always going to be difficult for fans to get their hands on this. But here you have a Silver Age book from 1967 where the census is, pretty decent. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity to get this thing, which, obviously is going to prevent it from going to the moon, but also is going to allow people to kind of cash in on their fandom for a character they see on the screen. All right, that's just mostly speaking for DC here, but of course we have to talk about what Marvel could do with this potential Henry Cavill free agent, as I like to call him. If I were Kevin Feige, I would be on the phone with Henry Cavill today. And the first one we have to talk about is one that has been spec'd on for quite a while now, and this of course is Avengers number 69, Avengers number 70, and Avengers number 85. A lot of different books to kind of talk about because of the sort of split appearance here. But what character, of course, are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the first appearance of the character known as Hyperion. Now, Hyperion, as you guys know, is sort of the, nod to Superman in the Marvel Universe. The Squadron Supreme is supposed to effectively be like the Justice League from a different multiverse. And there's been a lot of speculation that, in Loki season 2, we might be getting the Squadron Supreme. Perhaps they work for Kang, which, of course, in this book right here, Avengers number 69, this is actually the first appearance of the Grand Master, Jeff Goldblum's character. This is a Kang storyline. He fights the Avengers. And at the very last panel, on the very last page, we get a cameo appearance of the Squadron Sinister. And then we get to Avengers number 70. This would be the first full appearance of the Squadron Sinister. Of course, making up the team are characters like Hyperion and Nighthawk, Hyperion being the Superman equivalent to the Marvel Universe. And then when we get to Avengers number 85, we get the Squadron Supreme. And this is a different version of that team from a different multiverse that is actually a superhero version. And that is kind of, the book that a lot of people look at when they're thinking about Hyperion. In my personal opinion, I like Avengers number 70 because he is on the cover. It is definitely the first full appearance of this character, even if it is, a villainous version of the character. I personally like this book more. I think the cover is cooler, and therefore this is the one that I would personally spec on. But you can't really go wrong with any of these books. They all have different things going for them, and it's certainly possible that Henry Cavill could play a character like Hyperion. But for me, I feel like Hyperion isn't enough. I mean, I think that there are other characters that could be more interesting for Henry Cavill because, what is going to be the long-term viability of a team like Squadron Sinister? Are they going to come in to Loki season 2 and then they're going to, fight for Kang, and then when we get to Kang Dynasty, they're going to get beat up by the Avengers? Is that who we want? I feel like Henry Cavill is sort of the leader of your franchise, can be the leader and the face of the MCU. And so there's other characters like this one right here, the Sentry number 1. Now, the Sentry is another character that kind of is that Messiah, superhero, Superman character that has a little more depth to him than I think Hyperion does, a little more interesting. There's sort of a darkness to him, and that could be something that an actor like Henry Cavill could really sink his teeth into. And there's been a lot of speculation that the Sentry is going to be showing up in the Thunderbolts movie. Well, the Sentry makes his first appearance in Sentry number 1 here, and this is a book that has been, slowly picking up steam over the course of the last few months or so. Hasn't really blown up in the same way that other spec books have blown up. I think that has to do with the fact that this is a 2000s book. There's a lot of them out there on the census, and I don't know how many true Sentry collectors there are. How many holders of the Sentry are there going to be? The other character that I think a lot of people are talking about is, of course, Captain Britain, who makes his first appearance in Captain Britain number 1 from 1976, written by Chris Claremont. Now, this is a very cool book, in my opinion, a very cool character, but still not necessarily a household name that you would think Henry Cavill would step into. I mean, I could be wrong, but with all due respect to our friends of the channel across the pond, I don't really know. Is Captain Britain kind of big enough or S-tier enough of a superhero to kind of give to Henry Cavill? Certainly Henry Cavill can elevate the role, but do you guys actually imagine that when we get to Secret Wars, kind of like how Iron Man and Captain America are the leads of that film, that Captain Britain, that character, would be the lead of Secret Wars? Does that really feel right to you guys? I'm not necessarily sold on that. I'm not necessarily so sure, but this, of course, is still a very cool book, still a very cool character, and one that has been, connected to Henry Cavill for quite some time now. Captain Britain number 1 is sort of an oversized format. I don't know if you would call it a magazine, but it's definitely not a traditional comic book size. I know there tends to be a bias for collectors with those formats. So if you don't like those formats, you can certainly pick up a Marvel Team Up number 65, which of course is the first US comic book appearance of Captain Britain as well. But I think that these two books are sort of the 1A, 1B. I think Captain Britain number 1 will always be the money book because he actually does make his first appearance here and he is on the cover. This isn't like the Rocket situation where, in the Marvel preview magazine, Rocket is not on the cover, and I think that that's why Incredible Hulk 272 is really one that is desired in the market. Now, the last two characters I have for Henry Cavill are a little more wish fulfillment, but one of the ones that I think is most interesting for him as a character would be to take up a villainous portrayal of Doctor Doom. Now, of course, Doctor Doom makes his first appearance in Fantastic Four number 5, and this is a book that I think is really interesting, one that I feel like has many paper hand holders out there in the market. I've anecdotally seen this book up for sale more than most any other kind of blue chip grail Silver Age book out there in the market. You know, when we think about FF1 or Incredible Hulk 1 or ASM 1, books like that, I feel like everybody is trying to sell their FF5s right now, which, you know, could mean it's a really good time to pick it up. But I do think that a lot of people are selling because we didn't get the payoff of Doctor Doom in the Black Panther film. But certainly Doctor Doom is coming. I mean, it is inevitable at this point. And I do think an actor like Henry Cavill could do a really interesting portrayal of this character. And I think that this would be a juicy role for him. I mean, there's a darkness side to it. It feels like Doctor Doom is going to be a villainous character that is makes his appearance in multiple movies. And it does feel like this would be a really interesting possibility for the actor. Now, the last character I have is, in my opinion, the character, if I was Kevin Feige, I would definitely be talking to Henry Cavill as this character. No, I'm not talking about Wolverine. I know that's been a popular pick. No, I'm not talking about Wonder Man, although I think Wonder Man would have been perfect for Henry Cavill. But the character I'm actually talking about for Henry Cavill, which I don't necessarily think is going to happen, is, of course, the character of Cyclops. I think that Cyclops as Henry Cavill would be perfect casting. I'm of the opinion that we need a strong, good-hearted, Captain America-esque Cyclops type of leader in the MCU. No more memeing on this character. Cyclops could be the face, the Captain America replacement for the Marvel Cinematic Universe if you do him right. I'm obviously not the only one that thinks that. There's obviously a lot of fan art for Henry Cavill as Cyclops, and I think that this would be awesome casting for the character. Now, I don't necessarily see this happening simply due to the fact that Henry Cavill is now 40 years old. I don't necessarily think we're going to be getting the MCU version of Cyclops for another 5 years or so, so I'm not really sure it makes sense to cast a 45-year-old actor to play a character that is going to be the face of your franchise for the next 15 years or so, making him, 60 years old by the time you get it to, I don't know, what other event movie would there be at some point in the future, a Dark Phoenix storyline or whatever the case may be. Anyways, that's all for this video. That was me talking about the Henry Cavill situation and some interesting books, interesting characters that relate to who he could possibly be playing in the future. Let me know what you guys think. Are you guys disappointed about the Henry Cavill situation? At the end of the day, it's a business. I do understand why they want to recast him, simply due to the fact that, they want to build this thing from the ground up. They got to start over. They got to wash away all of the history, all of the Zack Snyder-ness from the DC universe to make it their own. So hopefully they are successful in doing that. Anyways, that's all for this video. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I'll see you in the next one.